At Crestview Academy, a prestigious institution where wealth and privilege dictate the social landscape, the new English teacher, Miss Elena Johnson, was faced with a challenge that would test her resolve. Samuel Worthington, a student with a history of entitlement, wasn't just another name on the roster. His family's legacy stretched back generations, and he believed that this lineage alone guaranteed him a spot at the top. On the very first day of class, Samuel's mocking behavior set the stage for an unexpected showdown. Instead of responding with anger or humiliation, Miss Johnson made a decision that would redefine their relationship. She would teach Samuel a lesson about life that would go far beyond the pages of any book. The assignment she gave him was not about literature alone. It was about seeing the world with fresh eyes. It wasn't about regurgitating facts from a textbook, but about learning empathy and understanding. Miss Johnson's challenge would ignite a journey of self-discovery for Samuel, reshaping his perspective on privilege, entitlement, and the world around him. Would this bold and unconventional move be enough to change him? Watch as a teacher's bold choice transforms one of the wealthiest, most privileged students, leaving a lasting impact on everyone involved. Miss Elena Johnson had spent years preparing for this moment. A graduate of Ivy League schools, she had built a career on hard work, dedication, and an unwavering belief in the power of education. At 35, having earned degrees from Yale and Harvard, she was determined to make a mark on the world of elite education, even if it meant challenging the very system that often overlooked people like her. When she walked to the grand gates of Crestview Academy, she felt the weight of both excitement and apprehension. She knew that teaching at such an institution would be a different experience, but she didn't expect the obstacles to appear so quickly. In the opulent halls of Crestview, it didn't take long for Miss Johnson to realize that the real test wasn't her lesson plans. It was her students. And one student in particular, Samuel Worthington, stood out as the embodiment of privilege. His family's name was a fixture at the school, and his father, a powerful businessman, had ensured that Samuel's place at Crestview was all but secured. But Samuel wasn't just a student. He was a challenge. His arrogance, entitlement, and condescending demeanor immediately made it clear that he didn't take Miss Johnson seriously. On the very first day of class, Samuel's late arrival was just the beginning. His attitude, swaggering and dismissive, was a clear signal. He didn't see any value in Miss Johnson's presence. "Shouldn't we be getting Dr. Miller?" he sneered, looking around at his classmates with a smug expression. "Are you sure you're in the right classroom?" Miss Johnson took a breath, her mind racing as she sensed the weight of the room's collective gaze. She could feel the expectations of her students and the challenge Samuel was presenting to her. He wasn't questioning her knowledge. He was denying her the opportunity to even speak as an authority in front of the class. She realized quickly that this wasn't just about teaching a subject. It was about asserting her right to be heard. Dr. Miller retired last year. Miss Johnson responded with calm assurance. "I'm your instructor now, Samuel, and I would appreciate it if you would show the respect I deserve." The class went silent. Miss Johnson couldn't tell her response had been too harsh. But one thing she knew for certain was that if she didn't assert herself now, she might never get the chance to. She'd learned in her previous teaching experience that showing weakness could be fatal in spaces dominated by privilege and wealth. She had to be firm, but she also needed to hold her ground with grace. By the end of the week, Miss Johnson had captivated most of the class with her passion for literature. She introduced them to works by influential authors, encouraging deep discussions about themes of identity, race, and history. However, Samuel remained defiant. He rejected every book she suggested, dismissing them with biting comments aimed at her qualifications and her perspective as a black teacher in a sea of privileged students. "Why are we studying diversity again?" Samuel asked one day, lounging back in his chair with a bored expression. "Why don't we just read something more traditional?" Miss Johnson took a deep breath. "Faulkner is as traditional as it gets. Samuel, he won the Nobel Prize for Literature." But Samuel wasn't convinced. "My dad says we should stick to the Western classics, stuff that will actually help us get into a good college." Miss Johnson's heart tightened at the sharp edge in his tone, but she kept her composure. "I understand your father's perspective, Samuel, but the Western canon is incomplete without authors like Faulkner. The more perspective you take in, the more you can understand the world around you." Despite her calm response, Samuel wasn't interested in understanding. His focus remained on proving that his privileged world was the only one worth paying attention to. And as his comments grew sharper, Miss Johnson knew it was time to make a stand. "I heard you were teaching in some rough neighborhood before this," Samuel remarked, loud enough for the class to hear, his tone mocking. "Bet it's a big change, huh? Teaching kids who can actually read?" The room fell silent, and Miss Johnson could feel her blood pressure rising. She had heard similar comment before, but this time it stung more than usual. This wasn't just a personal attack. It was an insult to her entire career, her students, and her background. She gathered herself, set down her pen, and locked eyes with Samuel. "Gather your things and meet me in the hallway. Samuel, we'll continue this conversation outside." Samuel, confident that he had won the upper hand, smirked and gathered his things. He walked to the door without hesitation, but he had no idea what was waiting for him. In the quiet hallway, the noise of student chatter from the cafeteria seemed far away. It was just the two of them now. Samuel leaned against the wall, his arms crossed, still projecting his usual arrogance. "You think you can talk to me like that?" he challenged, a grin playing at the corner of his lips. "My father sits on the board. You can't pull this with me." Miss Johnson took a moment to study him. She saw beyond the bravado. A young man who had never been challenged, never had to work for anything. Behind his arrogance, there was insecurity, a fear of facing reality. "No, Samuel," she replied with quiet firmness, "but I am more interested in who you are than who your father is. You repeatedly disrupted my class, and I won't tolerate it. You'll either show respect, or we'll be having a conversation with the headmaster." The impact of her words was immediate. For the first time, Samuel hesitated, his arrogance faltering. Still, he wasn't ready to back down. "I'll talk to my dad," he muttered, though his voice was shakier now. "I'm sure he'll hear about it," Miss Johnson said, her voice unwavering. "But for now, I expect you to reflect on your actions. We'll continue this on Monday." The next few days were tense. Samuel, who had once dismissed Miss Johnson with ease, now found himself wrestling with a new discomfort. His father's wealth and influence meant little in this moment. Miss Johnson had shown him a world where privilege wasn't everything. She had taught him the power of seeing things from different perspectives. One afternoon, as Samuel sat with Carlos, a student from a neighborhood with far fewer resources, he began to see the world through new eyes. It wasn't just that Carlos lacked the same advantages. It was that the system itself was broken, designed to favor people like him while keeping others down. By the time Samuel presented his final project, it was clear he had changed. Standing before his classmates and his father, Samuel spoke openly about what he had learned. "The truth is," Samuel said, his voice steady but emotional, "I thought success was all about who you know and what you have. But I've learned that true success comes from potential, the ability to overcome obstacles and make something of yourself no matter where you start." The applause that followed was slow at first, but it grew, and with it, Samuel knew that his journey wasn't over. His relationship with his father began to strain, and some of his friends drifted away. But Samuel wasn't afraid anymore. He had found a new path, one based on humility and understanding, and he knew the world had changed for him forever. Miss Johnson's bold decision had paid off. She had seen Samuel not as a problem to be fixed, but as a person capable of growth. And in doing so, she had changed the entire school. As Samuel walked across the stage at graduation, he realized the greatest lessons of all were the ones that came not from textbooks, but from the hard truths we face within ourselves. "The true privilege," he said, looking out at the crowd, "is not being born into wealth. It's having the opportunity to use your advantages to make the world better for everyone else." His words, once uncertain, now carried a weight he had never expected. As he scanned the audience, he found Miss Johnson watching him, her proud smile a reminder of the lesson that had shaped him. Change, he realized, begins with seeing the world from a different perspective.